Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, whenever or wherever you're watching this. Today I'm going to talk about menopause. Okay, and perimenopause more specifically. Also due to the fact, I think in this video what I'm going to be doing is going more so into exactly, yes, what's going on during perimenopause and menopause, but also kind of try and debunk the kind of myths around it, I guess, as well, in the sense. And the first one being that it's some kind of hormonal imbalance, dysfunction, or disorder. So when we talk about hormonal imbalances or dysfunctions, disorders, these are things that technically shouldn't be happening, okay? Perimenopause and menopause are two completely natural phases of a woman's life. Not only are they completely natural, they're two things that should be happening, and they're two things are going to happen to every single female. So I definitely think that we need to, this is something that I think there's not quite enough awareness of yet. Like if you try and do any kind of research, and this is me speaking from personal experience anyway, and this may be more so relevant to a couple of years ago when I first tried to dive into it, it's really difficult to get like high quality information and research on menopause. And the most informative thing that I could find was a documentary from Davina fucking McCall. So that really says it all. Shout out her because I think she's done a phenomenal job of actually spreading awareness, but at the same time, we shouldn't be relying on the host of Big Brother to give us our information on something like this. So yeah, I think what I'm going to do is kind of go over like what menopause, perimenopause actually are, and what's kind of going on during this time. And again, full disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a mere online coach who's maybe a little bit more versed in female physiology than others. I'm not telling you to go and do anything. Please do not take any kind of medical advice from me. Everything that I'm talking about comes from a holistic approach. With that being said, anything that I do say is coming from a holistical perspective, okay? It's not medical or professional advice. So when we talk about menopause, we're basically referring to the ceasing of menstruation. Okay, so the word menopause actually comes from Greek language, meno being the Greek word for like month, or moon, sorry, and then pause, Greek word being pausis. I've got no idea how to actually pronounce it. It's Paussis, pausis. That meaning pause or cessation. Okay, so basically it's referring to the end of a woman's time of the month. So the end of a woman's reproductive years, essentially. So menopause occurs completely naturally, and it's basically as ovarian function starts to decline and eventually stop altogether. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone start to decline alongside with it. As a result, the ovaries start to produce less eggs, and then consequently, estrogen and progesterone start to decline alongside that function as well at the same time. There's a period before menopause that is typically known as it's categorized, I guess, as more so being worse than menopause from a signs and symptoms perspective anyway, okay? Perimenopause is obviously what I'm talking about here, and that can last, typically it's between 2 and 7 years, but it can last a little bit longer. But this is basically the period of time before menopause where hormonal function is starting to decline, reproductive function is starting to decline. You've not entered full menopause, but everything is heading in that direction. And because of these hormonal fluctuations or declines, that's where symptoms like hot flushes, night sweats, mood changes, brain fog, vaginal dryness, changes in sex, appetite, mood change in general, all these kind of signs and symptoms occur because of these fluctuations or declines in hormones. So getting into perimenopause, this is something, again, that naturally occurs before menopause, and it's also referred to as the second puberty. And this is because the shift in hormonal patterns during this time in perimenopause, is very, very similar to the shift in hormonal patterns during puberty. So it's not like 100% mimicking it, but it's very, very similar, hence why it's almost been called, well, it is being called the second puberty. Now, in a woman's cycle in reproductive years, there is a certain amount of estrogen and progesterone that should be being produced. Now, during perimenopause, estrogen is high, whilst fluctuating high, and progesterone is lowering. And because of these kind of fluctuations and then gradually throughout perimenopause and into menopause, the woman's just producing less and less progesterone. Because of these fluctuations, this is where certain signs and symptoms start to come from. So the signs and symptoms pretty much arise from the high to lows of estrogen. And a lot of women have come out and said, like, yeah, perimenopause is significantly worse than menopause due to the symptoms that they experience because of these high to lows of estrogen. Now, because perimenopause can't be tested for, you can go and get your blood work done, you can get a blood test, but that's not going to really tell you anything. It's not going to identify perimenopause. So the only thing that we can really go off of to identify this is typical signs and symptoms. So a way that we can identify perimenopause is if we have a female who is in her midlife. The average age in which a woman becomes perimenopausal, I think it's something specifically 47 and a half years old. However, she can be younger, she can be older, it does happen, but that is the average range there. And in order to identify perimenopause, yes, for a woman who has a regular cycle and is in her midlife, around that mid-40s age range, she needs to have 3 of several different things. So a new onset or heavier flow during her period, a shorter cycle of 25 days or less, new onset of migraines, increased menstrual cramps, and a big one as well is a new onset of night sweats, but more specifically pre-menstrual. So before she hits menstruation, she's suffering from a pretty severe case of night sweats. I don't want to say a clear indicator, because you can get night sweats for several different other things, but if you're in your mid-40s and this has just come out of nowhere, it's a telltale sign. Yeah, even though perimenopause is completely natural, the signs and symptoms aren't so kind, okay? You can experience things like heavy periods, fatigue, pelvic pain, sore breasts, migraine, brain fog, night sweats. Even if we go down the mental health side of things, like a lot of women can experience things like anxiety and depression just because of that hormonal fluctuation and eventually decline. But also just even the things like the first reason why I got into learning about menopause is because one of my first ever personal training clients was a menopausal woman, and what she was experiencing and describing to me sounded absolutely wild, so I wanted to learn more about it. What I was finding with her was that she was getting such severe brain fog or even decline in cognitive ability where she literally would forget what she was talking about mid-sentence. It was causing her to feel like she was losing her mind, and that is her words, not mine. And this was causing her mental health to decline as well at the same time, which is completely understandable. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about is the mental health side of things. Obviously hormonally, but it's just a case of experiencing all these other signs and symptoms and how that makes you feel too. So there are a few things that we can do from a holistic approach, I guess, to help improve the signs and symptoms of perimenopause. So first one being a magnesium supplement. This can help promote sleep, and for someone who is suffering from night sweats, waking up during the night and just poor sleep in general, this is obviously going to help. Another thing we could do is include taurine. So taurine in a nutshell is an amino acid that can help block glutamate and adrenaline. So in a nutshell, it will calm your brain. So again, if you're struggling to get to sleep or you're waking up during the night, that's something that can definitely help. You combine the two things, taurine and magnesium, that will definitely help promote healthier, more efficient sleep. Another one is reducing cow's dairy or alcohol, more so being, well, this is going to help with premenstrual syndrome, okay? And the reason being is that because, number one, cow's dairy is pump filled with hormones, and that's not me talking with my tinfoil hat on, that's a known fact. So the less hormones and shit that you're putting into your body from, that isn't prescribed essentially, the less fucking about with your system, the less inflammation you're going to be causing too. So I think from a pain perspective, this is something that will definitely provide beneficial. Alcohol, we all know that this is a toxic, we all know it's a depressant. There's literally zero benefit to alcohol outside of, I don't know, you using it for enjoyment, I guess. So removing that or drastically reducing it is something that the majority of perimenopausal women and anyone in general actually would benefit from. And lastly, and I think more beneficially, you'd be looking at micronized progesterone. Now, because this is a form of hormonal replacement therapy, and I'm not a medical professional, I don't want to talk too much on this, but in a nutshell, micronized progesterone basically mimics the hormone progesterone. So when you look at hormonal birth control, and you are being told that you're given the progesterone pill, it's not actually progesterone you're getting, it's progestin, which is a derivative of testosterone. Whereas with the micronized progesterone, that's actually mimicking that hormone that you were, or currently to some extent still producing, if you're perimenopausal anyway, sorry. But because it's mimicking that hormone, it's a lot more bioavailable and bioidentical, actually. So it's essentially just topping up that hormone that is now depleted, meaning that things like sleep, night sweats, cognitive ability, general mood, get up and go, these are all things that will drastically improve. Again, because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not going to tell you exactly how much to be taking or anything of the sorts, but if you are perimenopausal, or I don't know, I know there's a few coaches that have been watching these. If you have a client who's perimenopausal, I would definitely recommend him to go down the private, don't go to your GP, but you might not find that very helpful or useful. So going down the private route, where you can actually get prescribed HRT, is what I have found in my experience way more efficient. Costs a little bit more, obviously, but it can be life-changing. So getting into actual menopause itself. Now, this is the phase of a woman's life that happens a year after her period has stopped completely. Okay, so periods have stopped, estrogen decreases, progesterone no longer exists, and follicle-stimulating hormone has increased here. And typically this will happen to women that are get to around to the early 50s. However, it can vary between women, from women to women. Again, as I was saying before with perimenopause, that age range can broaden, but typically we're looking at like the ages of 50 to 52 when a woman becomes menopausal. It's also worth noting that when a female becomes menopausal, she's then a lot more vulnerable to things like heart disease and osteoporosis. So estrogen being the hormone that is the main contributor towards, let's just say, heart health, but also towards joint lubrication, okay? Lubrication in general throughout the body. Because estrogen has declined and there's a lesser amount of lubrication within joints, etc., female becomes a lot more vulnerable to breaking things, osteoporosis in general, obviously. It's also why you see, and this is something that's actually come out of the woodwork a lot more recently, and I'm surprised it's taken this long, there's a lot more like research and statistics being shown of female athletes being a lot more vulnerable to injuries during their period. And the reason being is because during their period, estrogen is significantly lower than the rest of their cycle. So that joint lubrication is obviously a lot lower as well, meaning that they're more vulnerable to injury. So it's the same thing, but just to completely different magnitudes. Another thing a lot of women complain about or mention during menopause is weight gain. I say uncontrollable weight gain in the sense of it's unexplained, actually. That's probably the better word to use here, is they just generally don't know where it's coming from because they're still eating the same, they're still exercising the same, and maybe what they don't understand is that the same rules no longer apply in terms of what they were doing in their reproductive years to either create a calorie deficit or just create an equal or neutral energy balance in order to maintain their weight is no longer enough. So the first thing that can contribute towards this weight gain is, even though both estrogen and progesterone are declining or no longer, they've decreased, testosterone stays constant, or it can even slightly increase, meaning that there's an increase in androgens there, which contributes towards just water retention. So there's that first factor there that we need to consider. The second one being that a massive there's obviously going to be a change in metabolic rate. There's also going to be a decrease in muscle mass. So there are two things right there that is going to basically decrease the amount of energy that a woman expends at rest during menopause. So the amount of calories that you are burning just by keeping the lights on, just by sustaining yourself at rest while not doing anything, is now significantly lower, meaning that you're going to have to take in less calories. So it's a very bitter pill to swallow, but because there is that change in metabolic rate, because there is that decrease in muscle mass, and because there is a slight, There is a potential for insulin resistance as well, or at least an increase of it, meaning that the way that your body utilizes carbohydrates when intaking them is less efficient. These are all things that are going to have to equal either more expenditure or less calories. Now, the way that I would set up a female's diet when she's menopausal is prioritizing protein, but going towards the higher end of it. Okay, so you're looking at 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo of body weight, lean body weight, let's just say. You're then looking at high fiber due to the decrease, I guess, in digestive health. It's less, that digestive system is now less efficient, and it's constipation and lack of bowel movements in general is something that a lot of women complain about during this time. You want to make sure that a high fiber diet's in play. You're then looking at high unsaturated fats, and then you're looking at slightly lower carbohydrates. But making sure, most importantly, the diet is high protein, then high fiber, then moderate to high fats, and then low to moderate carbohydrates is definitely the way to go about it. Second thing that she needs to be doing is prioritizing strength training above any other form of exercise. As I was saying before, now estrogen has completely tanked. Female that's menopausal is more vulnerable to osteoporosis or any kind of she has weaker bones, joints, tendons. Those things need to be getting trained. Her body needs to be getting stronger, or at least trying its best to maintain that level of strength. So not only is it good for just body composition, it's going to be good for her overall health and well-being as well at the same time. So if we were kind of just to give like a good sort of overlying like to-do list, I guess, for a menopausal woman, it would most importantly be getting in at least 1.5 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, pushing for 2 if she's insulin resistant. Typical female, whether she's of reproductive or non-reproductive age, isn't getting enough protein anyway. So now that your body's in a position where it needs to be getting more, it really does need to be a priority. Prioritizing strength training above other forms of exercise, but also making sure that just daily movement in general is still pretty high. So when I say daily movement, I just mean steps, okay? And this doesn't necessarily mean you going for intentional walks. It just means you moving as much as possible. High quality sleep, so consistent bedtimes and wake up times, making sure that everything that you can do to gain as much efficient sleep hygiene as possible is actually being looked after. Eye mask, blackout blinds. Supplementation we'd be looking at is, yes, you have your standard omegas, vitamin D3 and K2, definitely vitamin D, I think, vitamin C, a multivitamin general, zinc, probiotic, etc. But 2 that is actually going to help support the menopausal signs and symptoms are magnesium and taurine, ideally combining the 2. Now, one thing that you can look at as well is melatonin, okay? And again, this is something that I don't want to go too much into, but it can help support not just sleep quality, but mood as well at the same time. So that's something that you can look at. The key to a healthy or just general good experience during perimenopause and menopause is making sure that you're getting the absolute most out of your natural ovulatory cycles during reproductive years. Okay, so every cycle that you're having is basically like a progesterone deposit into a bank account, let's just say, and this is then going to pay off in dividends during menopause due to the amazing benefits of progesterone in terms of health anyway, okay? So making sure, like, again, this is a bit of an iffy topic and I don't want to speak too much about it, but anything that you can do in your reproductive years to making sure that you have consistent and natural cycles that aren't interfered with birth control or anything else is then going to pay off in non-reproductive years during perimenopause and menopause because of progesterone. Because you're trying to keep it consistent throughout your reproductive years, there will be a higher amount going into perimenopause and menopause, meaning you can somewhat gain some level of it during that time in keeping those signs and symptoms and everything that I spoke about negatively anyway. You can keep that at bay as much as possible. Now, are you still going to experience it? Yes, but to a much lesser degree. So anything that you can do to maintain healthy, consistent cycles during reproductive years will make menopause a much smoother experience when you come to that time. Now, that's been a short sort of crash course on menopause and kind of what you can do from a lifestyle modification and holistic approach, I guess, to try and improve signs and symptoms and things that need to be prioritized during that time. It's definitely a topic that I can go deeper into, but without getting overly wanky or just creating a video that then lasts 60 minutes or so. I just wanted to do a brief, short, well, attempted shorter one anyway. If this is something that you've watched and you want to learn more about and you want to see a more in-depth video on it, please just let me know in the comments below, shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to. But yeah, hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. If there's anything else you wanted me to cover from a female physiological standpoint, please let me know in the comments and I'll catch you in the next one.